We're talking about cruise holidays this morning, and maybe it's a British thing, maybe it's inbuilt with us that we feel that we cannot complain. We mentioned earlier on 1 in 10 Brits who've been on a cruise say they've witnessed questionable safety procedures and don't feel safe when they're on board ship. Incidents include, as we mentioned before, 1 in 20 of us have had to deal with harassment from staff or other guests. There's cases of food poisoning, uncleanliness, unsafe, slippery decking services. Now, the research also shows that if it's faced with these similar scenarios, travel consumers do not know what to do and where to turn for advice. Those who've been on a negative experience while on a cruise but didn't complain said the main reason for this was because they found the whole process unnecessarily tricky. Well, joining me this morning on the phone from HolidayTravelWatch as solicitor Frank Raheny. Good morning to you, Frank.
Good morning to you.
I am perplexed. I'm intrigued by this because we alluded to it before. It conjures up fabulous images of, tropical sunsets, cruising, the life of luxury, and yet the research shows us possibly a completely different side to cruising. And
yes.
this bit intrigues me. So my first question this morning is, what does the research reveal about our experiences of cruising?
Well, a great introduction to our survey, but, let's stress that our survey demonstrated that over 90% of people were happy with their cruise experience. And what this survey did was to confirm to us our anecdotal experience that, sort of 9 or nearly 10% of those who cruised were not. And as you quite correctly point out, questionable safety standards, so that could be about food production, it could be about dealing with a mass outbreak of norovirus, it could be about, for example, the lifeboat drills or certification that is out of date that's displayed on there, or indeed issues of personal safety. Some of the cases that we hear about of indecent assaults and harassment are quite shocking.
It's amazing because I have family members and friends who like to cruise the seas, and with the obvious one, like the tragic incidents on the Costa Concordia, they are very, very rare experiences where things like that happen. Yes. Why do you think so many of us, so many complaints are handled so poorly with these things, Frank?
I think for a lot of the time, whichever travel company, whether it's land, sea or air, it's often the case that these companies are fearful. They feel that it's almost like a personal attack on them sometimes. But I also think it's the systems that are applied. So, often the first thing that really irritates any kind of holidaymaker is the way the initial letter arrives, acknowledging sometimes it's not personal, it's auto-generated. A good example, yesterday I had a problem when I actually missed a flight from a London airport, and a certain express train company did something wrong and caused us a few problems. And I wrote to them by email, and they wrote back to me and says, thanks for writing to us, we'll be back to you in 10 to 14 days because we're very busy.
It's shameful. It is absolutely shameful. And with the greatest respect to both yourself and to anybody who travels, whether it be by land, sea, or train, or whatever, whatever happened to the customer was always right. This is the bit that gets me.
Yes, yes, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, and it's kind of perpetuated because when they do reply, they often fail to deal with the points that are raised in complaints letter. They kind of skip around it. They don't acknowledge the serious complaints. And so, for example, in cruise cases, you'll often see companies or tour operators using statistics to say that from their surveys, these surveys that sometimes you fill on the plane on the way home, those statistics prove that they did nothing wrong and there weren't as many people ill as you experienced.
Well, I would imagine you've heard some horror stories in your job.
Yeah.
What's been your experience in giving advice to holidaymakers?
Well, I think cruise passengers are probably the most savvy of all holidaymakers, because we found that 68% of those who travel would complain on board, and that's absolutely correct. Excuse me, and that's what you should do. You should complain to the rep on board, put it in writing, get their complaints form, and get a copy. And if they don't resolve the problem, where you can and legally do so, take photos, videos, names and addresses, because these are your witnesses, that's your evidence. And when you come home, write to the travel or the cruise company within 28 days of your return. And whatever you do, never ever accept any offer to settle or sign anything until you've got some kind of independent advice.
Now, to follow on from that, part of the report pointed out that when asked, 11% of passengers didn't know where to go to complain. Is this something that the cruise companies should be looking at? They should be pointing out. I used to work for a big holiday company in the UK, and one of the first procedures was to greet customers, holidaymakers, at the door and let them know where they could find either myself or one of the staff at any given time, 24 hours a day. Should the cruise companies be doing this so that if there is a complaint, maybe you know exactly where to go?
Yeah. Oh, those great halcyon days of customer service. I mean, I wished we were there. I wished those who worked in these companies realised that. And the problem is because we are the click and go generation, and if you go on these websites, whether it's cruise, airline, whatever it is, I challenge anyone to actually find a way to communicate with some of these companies. It is very, very difficult. And you know what the real problem is? That they don't say sorry. And if they did, they would win the respect of these holidaymakers, cruise or otherwise.
That is so true. What would you say, Frank, are the best steps for carrying out a complaint then?
Well, I certainly, like I said a few moments ago, what you do on board and how you gather that evidence. And I think what you have to do, I think it's the one big problem that we see coming across our desk, particularly with cruises, oddly enough, complaint letters. They're not detailed enough. They're not structured enough. The holidaymakers can help themselves if they think very carefully about all the issues. So what I would do is, like when I write a letter, I kind of jot down the points that I want to make, and I'm not trying to teach people to suck eggs, but basically jot down the points you want to make, because that makes sure you don't miss anything out. And I think, you often see holidaymakers going back and forth between these companies because they suddenly raise another point later on in the proceedings, and that doesn't really help the situation.
And I would imagine another piece of advice is don't lose your temper straight away.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't benefit anyone whatsoever. I mean, sometimes, and we've heard it from holidaymakers, in fact, I've heard some telephone conversations where it's actually the reverse, where the travel company rep in the UK loses their temper with the holidaymaker, and there's been some very should we say, choice expressions used against the holidaymakers who are complaining.
Frank, absolutely pleasure. Where can our listeners go to get more information on the research that's been carried out, Frank?
Well, they can certainly visit us at our website, which is HolidayTravelWatch.com.
Brilliant. Frank, thanks very much for taking your time out this morning. And I hope you get your complaint resolved, and hopefully happy travelling in the future.
Yes, thank you very much for that.
You're very welcome. Take care, Frank.
You
Thank
too.
you.
See you. Bye-bye.